Sponsored by coffee, cigarettes, and madness.
Saturday morning, birds are singing, I got my notes, I got my coffee, and I'm going to tell you a short story as an intro to this video. So, there was this village called Warhammer 40k, and everybody in it tended their business, growing turnips, feeding pigs, and playing a war game. Tiny village. Most people didn't even know of its existence. And then one day, the village got bigger and bigger, and everybody mostly got along. And then a Bretonian hero came to the village, and everybody loved him. His name was Henri Cavill, and he lived with them in the village. One day he decided he was going to go questing, and because he was such a well-known hero, everybody found out the name of the village, and all eyes turned to the village, and the villagers were found to be heretics. Anyway, stupid story, but not that stupid. Today's video is on IP, intellectual property. Intellectual property is when you have an idea and you trademark it, copyright it, which are two different things, but now it's yours to control and to turn into a product for monetary reward. We all like monetary reward. Now, a lot of companies that have an IP, when they start off, they pull from the pot. There is a pot out there, and I'm going to stick to like the Games Workshop because that's what this channel's about. But they pulled from the pot for Warhammer, which is Tolkienian. Everybody does it. Dungeons and Dragons did it, and they're part of the pot. Tolkien was basically, I mean, you could argue he's the founder of that fantasy genre. So Warhammer Fantasy Battles started with the usual trope of elves, orcs, humans, and these are not trademarkable. You pull them out, you use them. You can trademark your company, you can trademark your logos, you can copyright your rule books, but the actual essence of what that thing is, you can't trademark. So what you do as you rise up, you start to add in elements of your own, and you name them your own. And those you can trademark. For example, Ratmen, you call them Skaven, you can trademark that. But the problem for Games Workshop is they couldn't trademark the most of the rest. So Warhammer Fantasy Battles as an IP, that's a tough one. They can copyright all the books. They could make a Warhammer Fantasy Battle movie, TV, whatever. But the merchandising off of that, people could copy it pretty closely because Games Workshop wouldn't own it. Therefore, other people will be making money off of the back of what Games Workshop were doing, as well as Games Workshop. Warhammer 40,000, you can see the beginnings of that the same, where they use descriptors such as Space Marines. That's a descriptor. They've trademarked it for board games and tabletop games. But again, you know, that descriptor is, as an object, it's a descriptor. It's hard to keep as a trademark. As they move on, you can see they start to name things. And Warhammer 40,000 got larger and larger and larger, and Games Workshop became more corporate and more savvy. You see things like Tyranids. They didn't call them spiky aliens. They gave them a name. They copyrighted it. They trademarked it. And with the books and the law and the trademarks, the copyrights, something that was very generic and still kind of is, and it's got a lot of stolen stuff in it, to be honest, which we'll get to. That became their property, their lore, and a viable product for selling and developing. Now, when we talk about stealing stuff, we'll get to later, but we know that the Gene Stealers are from Alien. Chaos is from Michael Moorcock, Eternal Champion. All of these things are directly attributable. But to be fair, people steal from Games Workshop as well down the line. So the Zerg in StarCraft and the StarCraft Troopers, very 40k-ish, I checked, they came out after the Games Workshop stuff. So, it's derivative of Games Workshop stuff, which is derivative of something else, etc., etc., etc. And it always goes back to that part. So once you've got this idea and this lore and all the stories in the world, you've got to turn it into a sellable product. Now, Games Workshop already had an idea that they wanted to make models. They bought Citadel, basically, and produced models for D&D, created Warhammer, which was supposed to be called Runehammer, but there was a game out there called RuneQuest. And also, that was when, for example, Michael Moorcock's History of the Rune Staff. So lots of rune stuff around when Warhammer was made. So they changed it to Warhammer so it didn't get confused. But again, derivative, and at the beginning, they had to create their own world in which they could have armies of figures instead of twosies and threesies, but armies of figures developed the old world, which again is derivative. It's basically historical wargaming on Earth, if you look at the map, and the factions involved in the humans, meets Tolkien, meets Michael Moorcock's Chaos. So all of it is derivative as far as fantasy battle goes. As that morphs into 40k, they start to change. They do a brilliant job, but dwarves become squats. There you go, you can copyright and trademark that, kind of. Now that you have this IP, and you're producing some stuff, and it becomes popular, you can license off stuff that you don't want to invest in, or you don't have the money to invest in, or you think it's too much of a risk, a high risk. So you can license off to, for example, all of the video games. Warhammer Fantasy Battle started with the Horned Rat, and I remember when that came out, and it was a crap game. It wasn't that good. It was very linear. There weren't that many troops. And the question was, are we going to get a game where we can make a troop list and fight against other armies? And the answer was a resounding no, because if you do, then you won't buy the models and you won't play the tabletop version of the game anymore. It'd be easier to sit down and play the computer than to gather up all your armies and go somewhere. As if that wasn't part of the army, wasn't part of the hobby. But as time went on and they had more games, Blood Bowl came out. And that helps grow the IP. Because people that play the video games never played the tabletop, get to know about the lore, the stories, and what the whole thing's about. Be it Fantasy Battles, Blood Bowl, and especially Warhammer 40k, when those games come out. To the point where the models for Warhammer Fantasy Battle weren't selling enough, they killed the whole tabletop world and then handed it all over to Total War video game. And those took off running. They made a crap ton of money. I don't know how much. I mean, I know they made a lot. Now it's gone the other way, where there's so many people that played that game, they've bought back the old world tabletop, hoping that the number of players that played the video game will then convert into people that play the tabletop game. So it's come full circle. So it seems the next step up is going to be TV and video and movie. And they created their channel, the Warhammer Plus and the Warhammer channel. But they did that also in a horrible way, in that there was a lot of fan animation on YouTube, which was really good. And somebody spent a lot of time and was really promoting their product, because you'd watch it and you'd want to play 40,000. You'd want to go out and you'd watch the Deathcore Krieg in the trenches on some of those animations, and you just want to go out and buy the models and paint them. And they came down on that, and they transferred some across to which made it very clear that the big thing about an IP is controlling it. You control the lore, you control how it looks, sometimes to a absolutely fanatical degree, which is where we are at the current state, but we'll get onto that. So once you've got this IP and it's growing, it's great, but it snowballs. So the bigger your IP, the easier it is to market things. I can make a movie called Joe's Flute. You won't know what it's about or anything. Probably wouldn't go see it. But if a Star Wars movie comes out, people know exactly what it's about and if they want to go see it or not. But the other thing that snowball effect has is that it seems to me there's an event horizon. There's a critical mass. When something gets big enough, it starts drawing in all these, I call them non-productives. Maybe I don't understand what they do, but a lot of the job titles are just made up, non-descriptive. I don't know what you do. If you watch a modern movie or a TV show, you'll spend the first 20 minutes of credits with producer, executive producer. It's like, what do these people do? And I think what it is they just throw money at it. And they're part of the, here's money. I'm a producer. I have some say in it. That's it. Because I can't think of what they do. All the other jobs are covered in the credit, like cameraman, director, writers, actors, editors, and then there's like a gazillion producers. And it's, once a thing reaches a critical mass, that's what happens. And all of these people have a say on it. So now you have a long-running IP, and at some point it attracts these kinds of peoples. I'm going somewhere with this. There's a couple of other things once your IP hits critical mass. You become a target. You put your head, once it becomes noticeable, big enough to be that noticeable, you get a certain section of society in all time frames that will look at it and say, how is that not doing the thing that I want it to do? And apart from the modern, social issues, we think that's, this is all terrible, and in the form it is. But I remember back in the 80s when Dungeons and Dragons got big enough to be noticed. It was called the Satanic Panic back in the 80s. D&D was absolutely attacked, burned. Heavy metal, Iron Maiden, all these things I was into, that group of people attacked all the things. It seemed to be they were targeting me. It's like, we don't like Iron Maiden, we don't like Judas Priest. They were burning records and books like Nazis, burning games, and it was Satanic Panic, they call it, look it up. And then today now we've got this gender inequality thing going on. It's very important to them. But now that Warhammer's got big enough, the IP's big enough, it's become a target. And it's not just that. If something else was going on, something else was an issue, that could happen. It's big enough to become a target for whichever crusade's going on at this point in time. The other thing that can happen once you reach a certain size is things will come back to sue you. Things that you took from the pot that weren't yours. The owners of that, or better still, the estate from the dead owners of that, will come looking for money. Even though you've been using it all these years without anybody saying boo to a goose, suddenly it becomes an issue. And a lot of times it's because they realize you've stolen it. And they don't mind small people using their stuff and getting away with it. But when the big guys have their stuff, creative people are kind of altruistic in the fight the man. And I'm going to give you a couple of quotes. So we know that Games Workshop stole from Michael Moorcock Chaos, including the symbol of chaos. And here's a quote from Michael Moorcock. I got these from michaelmoorcock.net. So the first one is, he said, I suppose I should have trademarked all that stuff, but like most of my contemporaries, the idea never occurred to me. I have some general trademarks which do cover the chaos symbol as well as other stuff like that, but it's a bore to pursue the people who rip you off. It's a price you pay, like Tolkien in fact, for being one of the first in your field. The stuff gets into the common consciousness. So, that's the quote from Michael Moorcock. I.e., he's saying, yeah, I could sue people for that, but it's boring and I don't want to do it. I'd rather get on with my life and do the things I like to do. So basically, he's good enough. He's still alive, thank God, because he's a great bloke. Read his books, History of the Rune Stuff, or Erica Melnabone. Then you'll see where a lot of the Games Workshop stuff comes from if you haven't read them already. Now, what happens when it becomes an estate and the money he's got that he's comfortable with gets split amongst, let's say, 10 people, and they're like, wow, there should be more money than this, look at all the stuff out there, and then they go after it. And if Games Workshop's huge and it's got a TV series and a movie, or Michael Moorcock, so here's the second quote from him. He looks at them and says, right, so here's the second quote. This is about, Games Workshop, which he calls Warhammer. Quote is, Warhammer have also been bad about paying some of these authors, according to the ones I've known. So they are ripping everyone off at every opportunity, it appears. This is an example of Pratchett's Law where people are taking everything out of the big pot and apparently putting absolutely nothing back in. Stew thieves. Nothing worse in this neck of the woods. There we go. That's the second quote taken. Now, what that to me says is that, you're starting to annoy me, and if you annoy them, maybe, and they've got a trademark on stuff, they will come after you if you piss them off. Yeah? And Games Workshop should know this. They are the worst for putting up cease and desist orders and, you've nicked our stuff, which we nicked from someone else first fairly. The bigger you get, the more of a target you are for that. Because we're talking about IPs. So the bigger their IP gets, the more they're going to become target for social warriors or whatever crusade's going on at the moment. I'm not going to go with people. It's just society attacks things. As you go through time, this becomes important. Let's attack it. So let's look at the IP future. I got a coffee. Look, continuity sucks in this video. So let's look at Games Workshop's IP futures. We've got Henry Cavill on our side. At least at the moment, there's a lot of people losing their minds, screaming that he's leaving because QAnon said, or whatever that network is. Nothing from him, so until I hear from him. But that's a weakness too. If you're going to bat and you've only got one guy in your corner, and you know that he leaves things if they're not the way he wants them, I get it, if the law's not the law and he likes the law, he doesn't have to do it. But if I were backing something with someone like that leading the charge, you're halfway through the battle and they decide that, the person I'm fighting for isn't fighting for the right reasons, I get that, you're allowed to leave the battle. But, choosing a general like that, that's kind of iffy, isn't it? Nothing against him. So we got Henry Cavill, that's good. But we've got Amazon, who had the biggest IP, Tolkien, and billions of dollars to throw at it, and they screwed it up. And the reason they screw it up is because, again, it reaches critical mass. You get this detritus of people coming in, putting stuff in that doesn't belong there, changing it for the sake of changing it, lack of experience in anything to do with that IP is the other thing. People come from the outside, know nothing about the IP or very little, think they do, And it just goes horribly wrong for the people that like the IP, that have been with it for years. These changes might be good, people outside looking in, but people that have been following the IP, is there a right or wrong? I don't know. So we got Amazon, we got Henry Cavill. What are they going to do with it? Well, I was looking around and I noticed when I was looking up trademarks, Games Workshop have trademarked Eisenhorn with as many classes of trademark as they have their own name, and as many classes as using the word Warhammer, which includes class 041, which is trademark for film or TV and stuff like that. So I'm guessing, the project's Eisenhorn. I mean, people have leaked out it's going to be this, it's going to be that. And I'm sure other people have said Eisenhorn just because Henry Cavill looks like him in some of the paintings a little bit. But that registration of 041 on trademarks, there's other things they own that they don't have that trademark on. Don't understand why they're doing 40k first though, because that is large risk and also high budget. It will be cheaper and easier to do Warhammer Fantasy because people understand in general a fantasy background. We've had Lord of the Rings and all that stuff, so that's for people to get into that and then have the Warhammer twist on it would be easier. And by doing that, you could introduce the concepts of chaos and the chaos gods, the big baddies, and the insidious nature of it. And if you really wanted to lead into and do the 40k, at the end of it, you could have, an Imperial warship leaving orbit from the Warhammer Holo. Kind of cheesy, but it would lead into it. And people would know when Warhammer 40k came out who Chaos was and all the other stuff, using a cheaper budget and an easier way in to those ideas. I don't know. I don't write movies. It's just normally it's not Games Workshop's money, it's Amazon's money. So yeah, it'll probably start with billions and some ballsed up script. Which we're trusting Henry Cavill will save, but the trouble is if Amazon pushes back and he leaves, what are you left with? Because that's what the history is. The people with the money push their agenda. They say, no, it's our money, we're making it, it's our film. And they're right. So there's a control loss there, and then, you get the person running it saying, well, that's not my vision, and if I can't do my vision, I'm leaving, which Henry Cavill has done. So that happens, let's say. There you go. Now what have we got? We've got a Rings of Power in space. Pile of poo. So, all of this up to now has been about the money, the IPs, how much it's worth, selling it, developing it, all that good stuff. Now, when Henry Cavill. So when Henry Cavill said that he was a gamer, everybody was like, yay, Superman's a gamer, that's great. I'm not sure why. I mean, I don't know why a lot of people want recognition through other people, but that's fine. And then when he said, I'm getting together with Games Workshop to make a movie at 40k, everyone's like, yay. I'm like, why did we need Henry Cavill to do that? There were people doing it on YouTube and that got slapped down, and some of those are really good. Why can't we just develop? But when I say we, see, that's how it works. It's not we, it's Games Workshop. But as a gamer, as a 40k gamer, let's say, or a fantasy gamer, and they bring out a movie. Okay, it's great. It's nice to have a movie if it's done right. The trouble is we're really picky. So to have it done right is hard. And if it is done right, it's not going to be good for a wider audience because it's so niche, is the problem. And then, really as a gamer, what have you got out of it? There are over 340,000 books. Read those. There's tons of lore and tons of entertainment. And I guess what I'm wondering is it worth taking something that you enjoy and then having that thrust in the limelight, and then having everybody gather around your village, call you a heretic. When you try and defend yourself, being attacked for the defense that you're giving, and then them saying, see, told you was a heretic, listen to your words. You know, I used to watch Doctor Who. I like Doctor Who. Then there was this big push, and Doctor Who had to be a woman. Same time as they're saying James Bond had to be a woman, and, you know, whatever. And I was like, all right, I didn't mind it. I had nothing against that. What I do hate is people that, holier than thou, take over something they know nothing about, don't really enjoy, and change it into something that they think everybody should have. Because the argument there is, we don't enjoy it because there's not a woman in there, then don't enjoy it. That's fine. I don't enjoy a lot of things. Not because it's man or woman, I just don't enjoy them. But then you take something I do enjoy and make it into something I don't enjoy, I want to fight back. And say, look, you've got your stuff. Leave me mine. Which is what Warhammer people are doing right now. And the quality of the writing on Doctor Who went down. The quality on Rings of Power is, you know, of the writing is terrible. Because they are trying to shoehorn things in that really the genre doesn't need to address. And it's contrived, and it is not along the interest line of the people watching that. If I want to watch an escapism sci-fi thing, I want escapism, I want sci-fi. I don't want to be lectured about the evils of 1950s or the evils of the 1820s, or because that's not what it's about. Also, I don't understand the attack on Warhammer 40k about the gender thing. When there is so much to attack in Warhammer 40k from a humanitarian point of view, or being inclusive, not inclusive. I mean, as we defend it, we dig ourselves deeper in the hole, and we become the neckbeards and the basement dwellers and the man children, and all these things that get thrown at us, but we're not allowed to throw anything back out again, because that then proves their point of what we are. Which it doesn't, but, you know, you can't argue. So you, basically, why do we want this huge IP? We don't. We don't get any. In fact, our prices are going up. See, Games Workshop wants the big IP for the money. God, I'm going to have to edit the crap out of this. Anyway, this was kind of about IP and where we're at and why you don't really want, as a fan, a big IP. Hope you've enjoyed watching. It's kind of a shit subject, but it was supposed to be about IPs and where we're at and why do we want an IP and why the internet's blowing up at the moment. I was trying to bring it down to what an IP is and why it is. Enjoy your game.
Like and subscribe, or the Inquisition will come pay you a little visit.